Hello and welcome to this presentation where I'll hope to briefly explain some of the key jargon and terminology that's used by the SRI community and beyond. So the first thing to be aware of in this area is that it evolved. It was not designed. There was no master plan. Back in 1984, when the first ethical fund was launched, the focus was very much on reflecting people's personal values. And that was really around the bombs, booze and baccy agenda. A couple of years later, along came the environmental agenda, with the first funds being launched to reflect those concerns. They still had the ethical values built within that fund also, so that really added to the number of issues that they looked at, and ethical funds responded accordingly by building in environmental social issues into their strategies also. We've then seen a growth in the number of funds that have looked at sustainability and put that as being central to their proposition. So within sustainability, we're looking at environmental and social sustainability here, and whether or not companies are paying close attention to things such as the use of resources, energy, their impact on the people that work for them, the way they treat their employees, etc. You've also then got the strand, which focuses more on investment in clean technology, although a lot of those are now built into what environmental funds focus on. Around about 2000, we then saw a growing focus on engagement, which was fund managers taking a decision to encourage companies to pay more attention to environmental, social and governance issues, because they thought it was investors' best interest that a company should do that, and that would help to deliver better financial returns. Which led then into ESG integration becoming more widespread, which is where we're looking at risks associated with ESG issues, so environmental, social and governance issues, and taking out those companies from investment portfolios where they were seen as being potentially risky because they weren't managing their risk well. Responsible ownership then became the broader agenda, which bolted a number of these together, which is looking at voting and dialogue and the conversations that can be had between investors and investee companies, whereby investors encourage companies to look beyond simply the next quarter's profits and further into the future to encourage the company to be better managed so that it would be more likely to prosper into the future. Over the last few years, we've seen a far greater focus on climate risk. So climate risk is all about fund managers understanding the implications and the risks and the opportunities to do with investing in ways that pay serious attention to climate change. Later on came the responsible ownership agenda, which has become increasingly important with the stewardship code, which is currently being revised by the FRC. But the stewardship code and stewardship practices are all about voting and dialogue and working with companies, often behind the scenes, to encourage higher standards. And then we've got the area of climate risk, which since the Paris climate talks and agreement have become increasingly under the spotlight, where investors are increasingly aware of the need to manage climate change down for the benefits not only of investors but for wider society. Another area you will have seen recently is social impact or impact investment. There's a lot of talk about this area at the moment. Important to remember that all investments have an impact, but these are investments that are made with the specific intention of trying to address environmental and social challenges, or all social challenges, and to generate both beneficial societal outcomes and financial outcomes. Some of the key words for you to be aware of then are on this list on this slide. So ethical, it's worth understanding that we're talking about personal values here and issues that really are in people's hearts that they care about. ESG is more of a risk-led strategy, which is around looking at environmental, social and governance and enhancing investment portfolios by avoiding or reducing ESG risk. Then you have SRI, which I refer to as sustainable and responsible investment, but some people refer to as socially responsible investment. The terms are used pretty interchangeably, but it's often used as an umbrella term to look at a range of ethical, social and environmental issues and the strategies that sit within addressing the challenges they present. And with regard to ways to addressing those challenges, the stewardship agenda is very much part of that, which is companies acting as part owners, voting their shares, talking through issues with senior management and encouraging positive change that will be for the long-term benefit of both investors and society. And again, there's the term impact, which you've got to understand people do use differently in different areas, but really that's around focusing on outcomes and the positive impacts and benefits that particular investment decisions can bring. Sitting behind those widely used labels are three core concepts. There's sustainability, which is really around looking at environmental and social issues. There's loads of different aspects to that, but we're talking about resource usage, human rights issues, carbon, labour standards, different issues all come within sustainability. And then you've got the Sustainable Development Goals, which were launched in 2015, which basically present a map as to how we can address sustainability issues worldwide, looking at both environmental and social issues. Lots of investment managers today map their processes and their investment decisions to SDGs as a useful way of helping people to tag the benefits of the investments that they've decided to hold. And then finally, as already touched on, but you've then got the area of climate risk, which is increasingly important for people to understand, in part because there's been an FCA paper on climate change and green finance. And what we see in climate risk is other important areas that you should be looking at if you're interested in this, which is the work of the IPCC, which came through in the Paris Climate Accord, and then TCFD, which is a response whereby the Bank of England and others have worked together to come up with a process that will help companies to report on their carbon emissions and other greenhouse gas emissions, which will become increasingly high profile over the coming years. I hope you find that brief run through useful. Thank you for listening.